Good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for finding time to be with us today. This is Diaspora Dispatches, where I get to bring you the latest news from the continent of Africa. My name is Miriam Ogutu. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're tuned in today. We shall start our broadcast this afternoon from Ethiopia, and an inquiry committee set up by the National Electoral Board of Ethiopia has confirmed that the chairman of the opposition Oromo Liberation Front, Dawood Ibsa, has been under house arrest since May 2021. Mr. Dawood's residence is guarded by plainclothes security agents to prevent visits to the chairman, local media has reported. Nabe described Mr. Dawood's arrest as unacceptable and demanded his immediate release. The board has also written a letter to the Federal Police and the National Intelligence and Security Services to ensure his right to movement is respected. Mr. Dawood and his OLF rebels returned home from their base in neighboring Eritrea after signing a peace agreement with the Ethiopian government in August 2018. However, a rift soon emerged with the former rebel group, and it ran into trouble with the government, which accuses the group of having links with a splinter armed group behind attacks in the Oromia region. We go to Nigeria, and gunmen in northwestern Nigeria have shot dead several members of the security forces a day after dozens of local self-defense volunteers were killed in the same area. The Deputy Governor of Kebbi State, Samaila Yombe Dabai, was in the Kenya village at the time of the latest attack on Tuesday. He confirmed there has been casualties, but gave no details. AFP news agencies reporting that at least 19 members of the security forces were killed, including 13 soldiers. Due to the frequent attacks by armed gangs across the northern Nigeria, some communities have formed self-defense or vigilante groups. On Monday, at least 60 of these volunteers were killed by gunmen. Security forces say they have been bombarding and raiding the forest hideouts of the gunmen. We go to Mauritania, where foreign ministry in the country has accused Mali's army of crimes against its nationals after dozens of protesters said their fellow countrymen had been killed in Cold War. Mali's ambassador Mohamed Dibassi was called in to hear a strong protest against the recent recurring criminal act committed by the army following the disappearance of several Mauritanians just over the border, the ministry has said. In January, several Mauritanians died in a border region, though after an inquiry, Bamako said there was no evidence linking its army to the deaths. Another incident took place over the weekend when 2 Mauritanians were shot at their way back to Abdel Bagru near the Malian border. Sources say some of the killed Mauritanians were accused of links to jihadist groups operating in Mali. And then we cross over to South Sudan. The United States has reminded the United Nations interim force in Abyei, UNISFA, on its mandate to use force when required to protect civilians in the area. The U.S. says it's greatly concerned over the recent escalation of violence in Abyei administrative area. The statement comes following fresh attacks in Agok town over the weekend, in which 27 people were reportedly killed and 4 others wounded by suspected Sudanese Messiria tribesmen. The U.S. also called on all sides to the recent violence in Abyei area to cease revenge and return to dialogue in a joint message to UNISFA. The U.S. Embassy in Juba and Khartoum said the United States supports expanded patrols in Abyei by the United National Interim Security Council Force for Abyei, UNISFA, and recalls that UNISFA's mandate authorizes peacekeepers to use all necessary means, which includes the use of force when required, in order to protect civilians under threat of physical violence, the statement read. And we go to the Democratic Republic of Congo, and a contingent of about 250 Ukrainian peacekeepers are to leave eastern DRC and return to Ukraine. The announcement was made on Tuesday by the UN. A date is yet to be announced for the departure. The withdrawal will also include equipment and helicopters. Nagoma is in the eastern part of the DRC and has been plagued by violence from dozens of armed groups for more than 20 years. Ukraine also has a military presence in other UN peace missions around the world: 16 personnel in South Sudan, 12 in Mali, 5 in Cyprus, and 4 in Abyei in Sudan, and 3 in Kosovo, according to the United Nations data. And then we go to Senegal, and the Senegalese President Macky Sall, who is also the current chairperson of the African Union, on Wednesday had a phone conversation with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin to seek a lasting ceasefire in Ukraine. The African Union had, in a statement issued on the 24th of February, called on Russia and any other regional or international actor who imperatively respect international law, territorial integrity and national sovereignty of Ukraine. He had urged Russia and Ukraine for an immediate ceasefire and the opening of negotiations with the help of the UN. Senegal, which has strong relations with Western countries, surprised the international community when on the 2nd of March by abstaining in a United Nations General Assembly's vote in a favor of a resolution that demands that Russia immediately ceases the use of force against Ukraine. And then we head over to Somalia, and United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres has recommended to the Security Council that the African Union maintains its staffing level in Somalia through the end of the year. The African Union mission in Somalia, AMISOM, comprises of 20,000 soldiers, police and civilians tasked with supporting the country's fragile government in the fight against insurgents. The AMISOM mandate expires on March 31st, but the UN Security Council is expected to vote on March 30th to replace it with the African Transition Mission in Somalia, ATMIS. In the letter delivered to the Council on Monday, Guterres said he prefers a plan to gradually reduce ATMIS in 4 phases to enable and support Somali security forces to take primary responsibility for security in Somalia by the end of 2023, with a complete military departure in 2024. The UN chief added that under the plan, ATMI's first reduction of 2,000 troops would not happen until after December 2022, with more decreases in every phase. So that is the latest news that we have from across the continent. So I don't know if our President Farmajo will be happy with that, a suggestion, that recommendation by the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, because we know that by the end of this month, AMISOM is supposed to morph and be called something else. Yeah, the ATMIS, the African Transition Mission in Somalia, and I think the mandate is not so different from what AMISOM has been doing. That is to ensure that Somalia stabilizes and then hands over the security, mantle of that country to Somalia itself. But when it comes to Somalia, there are a lot of underlying factors that have to be addressed for the country to be fully secure and be left to itself. There's the issue of elections that has kept being postponed. I think it was slated for the 15th of this month. I think just about 4 days away, and I don't know if that will happen. So that is something that has been postponed since last year, and that is also a contentious issue that has added to an already very fragile country in terms of its peace, and we've seen how the government and the top leadership has been sometimes not even speaking from the same, page when it comes to very important matters of the country and its, diplomacy out there. And I remember Prime Minister Harry resigned almost over 1 year ago, and then Roble came in, and Roble, seems to have been wanting to do things differently. And remember, at one time he came to Kenya and he had a diplomatic conversation with President Uhuru Kenyatta, and some decisions were reached. But going back, President Farmajo is not too happy about that, and so there has been a tiff back and forth in the top leadership of the country that has just added to a more destabilized Somalia. And so, peace has been elusive. So with this new mission, I don't know what changes. I don't know what is it that they need to do differently to ensure that Somalia indeed achieves this peace that has been forever elusive since the fall in the early 1990s. And, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres saying that perhaps as much as this new forces, this new mission, not force, but this new mission is coming in, but AMISOM also should maintain its forces there and President Farmajo has been opposed to the extension of AMISOM, and that's why it was necessary to form a new outfit, perhaps with a new mandate and different responsibilities and different goals, to see if they can be able to achieve that. Because remember, in the AMISOM, these are 5 African countries that have been in Somalia now for quite a while. They've been accused, a few countries have been accused of even being part of and participating in the chaos that are happening in Somalia, and all of that. So that has made President Farmajo a bit uncomfortable. And truly speaking, the mandate has really not been realized, because still the mandate was to defeat Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab is still very much alive and active in Somalia, and also to stabilize Somalia. Parts of it maybe, but not so much. There's still so much to be done in Somalia. So I think hopefully this new mission will do different things, and perhaps to be able to achieve different results there. Charles Munga, thank you so much. You're saying you're watching from Rome. Thank you so much. And so just moving on from that, so we will wait and see if President Farmajo will be in agreement to that recommendation that has been made with the United Nations, Secretary General Antonio Guterres, of not dissolving AMISOM completely, even as they bring this new, outfit, ATMIS, to the scene, because AMISOM, as we speak right now, has about 20,000 soldiers, police and civilians tasked with supporting the country's fragile government in the fight against the insurgents. So that was the core mandate when AMISOM was moving into Somalia. Obviously, that has not been achieved. So maybe this new outfit with that mandate, but also other responsibilities added, maybe can help in realizing a more stable Somalia for the good of all of us. We've been affected here in Kenya with that instability and that insurgency that has been going on there in Somalia. And for us, we were actually sucked into that. We really wasn't. Kenya wasn't really looking into going into Somalia, but until the Al-Shabaab started kidnapping people from Kenya's side and causing a bit of some tension there, the government had to go in and stop that. So the Kenyan army was forced into going into Somalia. But there has been conversations that, perhaps they've overstayed their welcome and maybe they need to come back home. But, I don't have the intelligence. So there has to be a good reason why we still feel it's important for KDF to be in Somalia, of course, with other countries that have formed the AMISOM. Let's move on now to South Sudan. And the United States now is reminding the United Nations Interim Force in ABA, UNISFA, that its mandate, it can use force when required to protect civilians in the area. Because a lot of times we have wondered, we've seen this happen in South Sudan, we've seen this happen in Democratic Republic of Congo, where areas adjacent to camps where these, United Nations missions are, you find that is where there's been increase in security, and civilians continue to die, and the insecurity continues. And this mission, they seem to be, the forces in the missions, they seem to be, the hands are tied. It's like, we cannot help it. There's nothing we can do. So you wonder if you're going there for peacekeeping and to provide security for the civilians in these restive areas, but their lives are in danger. They're being killed by these insurgents, and you do nothing. That has never made any sense. And our United States is telling, because of the recent attacks that have been happening and killings, I think I reported some here yesterday and others happen and has been happening. South Sudan is still a bit turbulent. And so the United States is saying, you know what, by protecting the lives of the people of South Sudan, whatever it takes, even if it requires using force, firing back, stop holding your arms as if you're holding flowers while you're dealing with gangs of people who, don't understand the importance of sparing the lives of the people who have nothing to do with whatever is going on there in South Sudan. So if you're forced to use it in order to protect the lives of the civilians, then you go ahead and use it. And so it is reminding the United Nations Interim Force in ABA, UNISFA, on its mandate to use force when required to protect civilians in the area. The US says it is greatly concerned over the recent escalation of violence in Abyei administrative area, and I think that has been a point of concern to even the region, because after even the signing of the latest peace agreement, that would have seen the quick implementation of the revitalized peace agreement of 2020. Remember, 2018, they resigned that in 2000, and I think it's 2 years now. It got to 2 years in February last month. And there's nothing much to show for it. And so it's even the United, I think, Nations just the other day urged the leaders of South Sudan, was on Monday, to do more to prepare for elections due to be held. Remember, the elections were to be held this year, but President Kiir in the middle of last year said the elections cannot be held because the things that are supposed to be in place, the structures even to hold those elections, were not in place. And on top of that, he said the country was broke and it could not really hold elections. And I remember some stakeholders from like the US and other countries came in and said, you know what, if you're really willing to go to these elections, we can actually fund and support partly. We can offer you that help that you need. But I think President Kiir was not, to be honest with you, I don't think he's even keen on having elections in South Sudan. And we've had his position on different occasions on the same matter. And I think at some point he once said that, you know, the reason why I'm even overstaying as the president and perhaps elections have not been carried out is because South Sudan is not stable. It's because you're making it difficult. So if you would stop doing whatever it is other groups are doing in South Sudan, we can actually hasten with having these elections, and then we see the next crop of leaders who perhaps come and bring change to South Sudan. But I don't think he meant it. These leaders on the top helm in South Sudan, I think how South Sudan is right now works perfectly for them. So they wouldn't want to mess that up. They wouldn't want to change, the status quo. So the people continue languishing in these refugee camps and across the world. South Sudanese refugees all over the world, sitting and hoping that one day they will return home. And then you go back home and there are people there who are saying, no, this chaos, they're benefiting from it. From that chaos, millionaires in South Sudan, dollar millionaires, are being created every day from South Sudan, through dubious acts, through corruption, because if you don't have proper systems in place for checks and balances, you don't know what is really happening. Okay, so that is working perfectly well for the political elite, class. So the rest of South Sudanese are just folding up, hoping that perhaps one day things will work out there. Remember, between 2013 and 2018, South Sudan descended into a bloody civil war between sworn enemies Riek Machar and Salva Kiir, which left nearly 400,000 people dead and millions were displaced then and are still displaced now. And in 2016, their first attempt at peace was shattered when Kiir sacked Machar from the position and forces loyal to the president and the former rebel leader returned to war. A peace deal that was just, South Sudan got its independence in 2011, just 2 years before, the country was just settling into its newfound position and place. 2013, it plunged into war. Then after that, in 2016, after some talks and all that, it was hoped that perhaps through mediation from different stakeholders, now they'll bring back the country into a proper path to, stabilizing. And then there was a disagreement and, forces from President Salva Kiir and his first vice president, got into a war that plunged the country back into war, and a peace deal signed in 2018 that we've been talking about. And we all know the revitalized peace agreement of 2018 led to power sharing in a national unity government sworn in February 2020 with Kiir as president and Machar as vice president. There are five. So Machar is the senior most vice president, okay, and then we have 4 others. So Machar is the first vice president. So I guess that is a bit different from the rest of the other 4 that we do have in that government. But the provisions of the peace agreement remain largely unimplemented, due mainly to persistent disputes between the 2 rivals. And if you can remember, on February 22nd, 2020, as I mentioned there earlier, South Sudan's rival leaders Salva Kiir and Riek Machar formed a unity government. The deal was a revitalized version of one original agreed on in 2018 to end fighting. And by the time the 2 men signed it, thousands of people had been killed and millions displaced in the civil war that had erupted again in 2013. Now, Kiir remained president and still does under the unity government, and Machar was reappointed as his deputy. Their terms were set for 3 years until national elections are to be held in 2023. Of course, that was moved forward. The elections were to be held this year, but due to some prevailing, factors that made it a bit impossible for the elections to be held. And with a Security Council decision expected on March 15th on the renewal of the peacekeeping mission in South Sudan for a year, one of the most expensive one in the United Nations book. The mission in South Sudan, the United Nations mission in South Sudan, is one of the most expensive one that the UN has have sponsored in its years of sending missions in countries that are experiencing conflicts and wars, with an annual budget exceeding $1 million US. So it's a lot. And of course, the current deployment is to remain the same level of about 17,000 troops and 2,100, police. So, it's even costing so much. Of the money from the United Nations and from other donors, and, time and efforts from other countries. And the issue of South Sudan, I think it's very, when they went to Rome and the Pope kissed their feet, I thought, you know what, that will be the magic. That will be the one thing that perhaps will bring change into South Sudan. Years later, we are disappointed because, nothing much has changed. The implementation of the revitalized peace agreement has not really taken place, and I think maybe COVID has something to do with it. COVID brought a lot of confusion around the world, so that is said to have slowed down some of the implementation. But even before COVID was here, they were not implementing anything. Since 2018. They were not implementing anything since the agreeing to work together again in 2020. Nothing much has been taking place. So it's I don't know who we need to blame on this one, but perhaps we just wait and see if at all some of these things will come to pass. But of course, one of the key things that South Sudan has been saying has made the implementation a bit slow is the lack of funds. Because one of the key things was to make sure that these soldiers, the unified soldiers, they're supposed to be trained, and then they pass out, and then they're sent across the country to ensure that South Sudan, army acts like, army from a normal country. Because as you know, right now, army in South Sudan is like a militia. One side is allied to President Salva Kiir, the other side is allied to Riek Machar, the other side is allied to Thomas Cirillo, the other side is allied to which other leader. So they just like militia. So there's not that unified force. So one of the key articles in the revitalized peace agreement of 2018 was to have a strong force of 83,000 South Sudanese soldiers. So they have been training. They have, in fact, right now they're supposed to have, been stationed differently, but they're still being held in cantonment sites because South Sudan does not have money and the capabilities of, redeploying them across the country and having them leave these cantonment sites. And as the last we checked, these soldiers got tired of living in these deplorable conditions, so they have been moving and going to the villages with arms with them. And so when they go back, that has been also now creating another crisis as far as security is concerned. Because if somebody is going to the village and they have no work and they have nothing else to do, so what they're said to be doing, according to some reports that have been presented to the United Nations, they go and form village, vigilante groups or village something. So now that insecurity is spread, it's trickled down from top there, the mass, all that down to the villages. And that's why you see an increase in communal fighting in South Sudan. Of course, among other factors that have created this, the bad politics, the ethnical tensions. It's a whole lot of things that have brought South Sudan to where it is today. But still, we are hopeful. I think that probably the leaders will one day realize, the important thing, and that is the people of the country of South Sudan, and perhaps they'll be able to, prioritize in stabilizing South Sudan and bringing peace and setting the country to a path of prosperity. But that is just a dream for now, because I don't know. Let's just wait, and 2023 is not very too far. I'm hoping that by the this year or later on this year, President Salva Kiir will not come up again and tell us, you know what, even the elections that we had rescheduled for 2023, we cannot have them because of these other factors. I think that will not be very good for South Sudan. Maybe a change of leadership might come with it, the change that is required, who knows? And so if they keep postponing these elections, but also you have to think about it, even with elections, it has other challenges that South Sudan has to address first. First of all, they don't even know the exact number of people because, they have not done their census. They need to do their census. And then on top of that, people are in refugee camps here in Kenya, in Uganda, in South Sudan itself. We have people there in refugee camps in South Sudan and across the world. So when are you going to register them, and how are you going to register them, and why are you coming to the refugee camp to register me as a voter while you're supposed to be telling me of how I should be going back to my village because you have ensured my security, So I think it's a lot of other issues that South Sudan has to truly address before it even rages its election. All right? So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you back here tomorrow. This has been Diaspora Dispatches. Good afternoon, good evening, and a very good morning to you, depending on where you're watching. My name is Miriam Ogut. Bye-bye for now.